यशवंतराव चव्हाण प्रतिष्ठानच्या वतीनं
प्लीज गो इन द फ्रंट.
विज्ञान गंगा या उपक्रमाच्या या चौथ्या भागामध्ये आपल्या सर्वांचं मनपूर्वक स्वागत. गेले 3 महिने आपण वेगवेगळ्या विषयावर देशातील त्या विषयात खूप मोठं कार्य केलेल्या मंडळींना ऐकलं. आज आपल्या सर्वांना परिचित असलेली जी गोष्ट आपण नियमितपणे वापरतो, GPS, त्या संबंधामध्ये नवल गुण सर जे इस्रोचे प्रमुख राहिलेले आहेत आणि गेल्या 2 दिवसापूर्वी आपण इस्रोच्या हातून जी फार मोठी कामगिरी घडलेली आहे ती आपण वाचलेली आहे. एवढंच नव्हे तर हवामान बदलाच्या संबंधात सुद्धा इतर संस्थांबरोबर इस्रो आता अधिक माहिती गोळा करून अधिक अभ्यासपूर्ण रीतीने त्याचा वेध कसा घेता येईल याचाही प्रयत्न करत आहेत. अशा एका देशातील फार मोठ्या संस्थेचे प्रमुख आपल्याला या विषयावर आपल्याशी बोलणार आहेत. सरांविषयीची अधिक माहिती काळेसर देतील, पण थोडी काही लोकांनी विचारणा केली म्हणून सांगतो. थोडी भाषेची मागच्या वेळेला रंजन केळकर सर मराठीतून आपल्याशी बोलले, पण सर धारवाडचे आहेत, मराठी त्यांना समजते, पण मराठीतून मोकळेपणे बोलणं या विषयावर त्यांना शक्य होणार नाही. सोप्या इंग्रजीतून आपल्यासमोर त्याची मांडणी ते करतील. त्यामुळे काही मंडळींना त्याची थोडी अडचण आहे. मला वाटतं विषयाच्या संबंधामध्ये आपली जी काही उत्सुकता आहे ती त्या भाषेवर निश्चितपणे मात करून आपल्याला तो विषय समजायला मदत करेल. आपण लोक बहुतांशी यातली मंडळी गेले 3 व्याख्यानाला सातत्याने येत आहे ते मी पाहतो. फक्त माझी विनंती अशी आहे की सुरुवातीच्या व्याख्यानापासून आजपर्यंतची जर नावं आपण पाहिली तरी देशातली मोठी नावं आहेत आणि तरी देखील मुंबईतून आणि इतर सगळ्या भागातून याच्याविषयी जो प्रतिसाद असायला हवा तो थोडासा कमी आहे आणि त्या संबंधामध्ये आमच्याबरोबरच तुमच्याही प्रयत्नांची साथ आम्हाला हवी आहे, तुमची मदत आम्हाला हवी आहे की सायन्स कॉलेजेस आहेत त्यांच्याशी आम्ही संपर्क केला आहे, त्यांनाही आमची निमंत्रणं गेलेली आहेत. मधल्या काळात सुट्या असल्यामुळे त्यांना येणं शक्य नव्हतं, पण आता ॲडमिशन सुरू झाली आणि पुढच्या व्याख्यानापर्यंत कदाचित क्लासेस सुरू झालेले असतील किंवा त्याहीबद्दल आपली मदत आम्हाला लागेल. आणि त्याशिवाय सुद्धा अधिक लोकांच्यापर्यंत हे जर आपण पोचवू शकलात, माध्यमांच्याकडूनही चांगला प्रतिसाद मिळतो आहे. सध्या संघटित आहेत, लोकसत्ताने मागच्या वेळेला अधिक मोठ्या प्रमाणात त्याला जी प्रसिद्धी दिली त्याचाही खूप उपयोग होतो आहे, पण ती अधिक मोठ्या प्रमाणात जरी मिळू शकली. हे व्याख्यान अतिशय काय म्हणू आपण त्याला एका लोकप्रिय व्याख्यानमालेचं नव्हे, त्यामुळे त्या प्रकारची गर्दी अपेक्षित नाही. पण मुंबईच्या भागात इतकी जाणती लोक कमी आहेत असं मानायचं काही कारण नाही की यांना ऐकायचे नसेल. असू शकतील, पण तिथपर्यंत कदाचित आम्ही पोचू शकत नसू, तर त्याचाही आपण प्रयत्न करावा. आपल्या संपर्कातून आपल्या सोशल मीडियाच्या माध्यमातून हे अधिकाधिक लोकांच्यापर्यंत पोचवून अधिकाधिक लोकांनी याचा जर फायदा घेतला तर मला ती मदत प्रतिष्ठान आपल्याकडनं हवी. पुन्हा एकदा नवल गुण सर या ठिकाणी आलेत, त्यांचं मी आपल्या सर्वांच्या वतीनं मनपूर्वक स्वागत करतो आणि या व्याख्यानाचं प्रास्ताविक आदरणीय काळे सरांनी करावं अशी त्यांना विनंती करतो. शरद काळे सर.
मित्रहो, विज्ञान गंगा हा एक नवीन उपक्रम प्रतिष्ठानने सुरू केलेला आहे आणि त्याच्यातली कल्पना अशी आहे की जे विज्ञानातले विषय असतात त्यांच्यावरती लक्ष केंद्रित करून असं खास व्याख्यानांचं आयोजन केलं जात नाही. आणि वास्तविक पाहता आता आपण अशा युगामध्ये आहोत की जिथे विज्ञानाचं महत्त्व फार आहे. त्यामुळे विज्ञानातले जे विषय आहेत त्याची निदान आपल्याला तोंड ओळख असणं हे फार आवश्यक आहे. कारण प्रत्येकाला काही विज्ञानातला विषय हा अगदी सखोलपणे समजेल किंवा समजून घेण्याची गरज आहे असंही म्हणता येत नाही. पण माहिती असणं आवश्यक आहे की हे काय चाललं आहे जगामध्ये, ही माहिती पाहिजे. दुसरी गोष्ट त्याच्यातली आमची अशी इच्छा आहे की त्यानिमित्ताने विज्ञानाच्या क्षेत्रात ज्यांनी महत्त्वाचं कार्य केलेलं आहे अशा व्यक्ती आपल्यासमोर येतात. कारण ह्या व्यक्ती साधारणपणे पडद्याआड असतात. इतर अनेक क्षेत्रामध्ये जी माणसं काम करतात लहान मोठं, तर ते त्या मनाने पुष्कळ जनतेसमोर आलेलं असतं, ते त्या व्यक्ती माहिती होतात. परंतु शास्त्रज्ञ वैज्ञानिक ही मंडळी मागे राहतात. मला वाटतं गणितातले लोक सगळ्यात मागे राहतात बहुतेक. त्यामुळे ती एक कल्पना आहे की आपल्या डोळ्यासमोर एक कोणीतरी यावं, आणि ह्या दृष्टीने आपण सुरुवातीपासून जे 2-3 कार्यक्रम केले, तो सुरुवातीलाच आपण डॉक्टर संजीव धुरंधर यांनी अगदी अगदी अलीकडची जी एक विज्ञानातली प्रगती आहे, ग्रॅव्हिटेशनल वेव्स, त्याविषयी त्यांनी भाषण दिलं. त्याच्यानंतर डॉक्टर अनिल काकोडकरांसारखे विश्वविख्यात शास्त्रज्ञ ते आपल्यासमोर बोलले की साधारण 2035च्या काळामध्ये तंत्रज्ञान आणि विज्ञानाची परिस्थिती काय असेल किंवा एकूण परिस्थिती काय असेल, आणि त्यामध्ये विज्ञानाच्या साहाय्याने आपण कसं त्याच्याशी चांगला सामना करू शकू किंवा त्याच्यावरती मात करू शकू. तिसरं व्याख्यान डॉक्टर रंजन केळकरांचं झालं. ते हवामान क्षेत्रातले तज्ज्ञ आहेत, आणि आम्ही मुद्दाम त्यांना पाऊस सुरू होण्यापूर्वी बोलावलं होतं की आगामी पावसाळ्याविषयी त्यांनी सांगावं, आणि त्यांच्याशी प्रश्नोत्तरं बरीच झाली, आणि त्यांनी हा विषय समजावून सांगितला. कारण वेधशाळेचा अंदाज चुकीचा कसा ठरतो यावरती कार्टून काढणं आणि विनोद करणं हे पुष्कळच ठिकाणी आपल्याला दिसून येतं, परंतु ते सोपं आहे. परंतु कितीही गणिताचा उपयोग केला तरी देखील नेमका पाऊस केव्हा पडेल, कुठे पडेल हे काही सांगता येत नाही. कारण आज मला सांगितलं की इकडे एवढा पाऊस आहे, परंतु उत्तरेला एवढा पाऊस नाही आहे, मुंबईच्याच उत्तरेला. म्हणजे ह्या गोष्टी सांगता येतातच असं नाही. तर आज आता आपल्याला आपल्यासमोर जे डॉक्टर नवल लुंदा हे आलेले आहेत, तर ते देखील असंच एक क्षेत्र आहे की ज्याच्यामध्ये त्यांनी स्वतः खूप काम केलेलं आहे. 35 वर्ष आज ते विज्ञानाच्या क्षेत्रात काम करत आहेत, आणि सध्या देखील ते विक्रम साराभाई डिस्टिंग्विश प्रोफेसर म्हणून इस्रो बंगलोर इथे काम करत आहेत. यापूर्वी त्यांनी डायरेक्टर स्पेस ॲप्लिकेशन सेंटर, म्हणजे इस्रोमधलंच स्पेस ॲप्लिकेशन सेंटर, ह्याच्यामध्ये काम केलेलं आहे. डायरेक्टर ऑफ नॅशनल रिमोट एजन्सी सेन्सिंग एजन्सी हैदराबाद इथे काम केलेलं आहे, आणि या विषयात त्यांचं खूप विस्तृत अशा प्रकारचं त्यांची जे काही ज्ञान आहे किंवा प्रावीण्य आहे ते आहे. त्यांना असंख्य पारितोषिक पुरस्कार मिळालेले आहेत. इस्रो आउटस्टँडिंग अचिव्हमेंट अवॉर्ड, डिस्टिंग्विश ॲलमनस ऑफ TIFR, त्यांनी TIFRमधून PhD केलेली आहे. महाराणा उदयसिंग अवॉर्ड फॉर एन्व्हायरमेंट, वासविक अवॉर्ड, भास्करा अवॉर्ड, इंडियन नॅशनल रिमोट सेन्सिंग अवॉर्ड, ASI अवॉर्ड फॉर आउटस्टँडिंग कॉन्ट्रीब्युशन इन स्पेस सायन्स अँड ॲप्लिकेशन्स, KR रामनाथन गोल्ड मेडल, आणि आउटस्टँडिंग लिडरशिप अवॉर्ड हे मिळालेलं आहे. यातल्या शेवटच्या ह्याच्यावरून आपल्या लक्षात येईल की आजच्या जगामध्ये एक एकटा शास्त्रज्ञ हा काही काम करत नसतो, तर तो एक शास्त्रज्ञांचा गट असतो, आणि काही वेळेला तो खूप मोठा गट असू शकतो. आत्ता परवा जे काही आपण कालच का परवा जे आपण पाठवलं, यान पाठवलं, 20 आपण उपग्रह एका वेळेला पाठवले. एवढं मोठं जेव्हा हा एक मोठा प्रकल्प असतो, महाप्रकल्प असतो, आणि त्या महाप्रकल्पामध्ये अनेक शास्त्रज्ञ हे काम करत असतात, आणि त्यावेळेला मुख्य जो असेल शास्त्रज्ञ त्याला केवळ ते विज्ञान समजून पुरेसं चालत नाही, त्याला त्याच्यामध्ये नेतृत्वाचे गुण लागतात, आणि लोकांना स्फूर्ती देईल, प्रेरणा देईल अशा प्रकारची ती एक प्रकृती लागते. आपण हे APJ कलाम यांच्या देखील आयुष्यामध्ये बघितलेलं आहे. तर ती लिडरशिप ही देखील त्यामध्ये महत्त्वाची आहे. तेव्हा असे आपल्याला आज वक्ते मिळालेले आहेत. मी त्यांचं प्रतिष्ठानतर्फे मनपूर्वक स्वागत करतो. आपण संख्या थोडी असली तरी जोरात टाळ्या वाजवून त्यांचं स्वागत करावं. धन्यवाद.
काळे सरांना विनंती करतो की पुष्पगुच्छ देऊन त्यांचं आणि नवलगुण सरांना विनंती करतो की त्यांनी त्यांचं व्याख्यान या ठिकाणी सुरू करा.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. I would like to especially convey my thanks to both Yashwantrao Chauhan Pratishthan and Marathi Vigyan Parishad for inviting me to give this particular talk here. I also apologize for speaking in English because that's the language in which I can speak. The only other language I can talk, not speak, is Kannada. And also I can speak Mumbai Hindi, since I spent about 9 years in Bombay, both at IIT Powai and Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, which is at Navy Nagar, Kolaba. Today's talk, first I was thinking I will, as Mr. Deshpande asked, first whether you will speak only on GPS, because I think that just the previous day the Prime Minister had announced that India has made the constellation Navik, N-A-V-I-C-K. But actually that is only the navigation using Indian constellation, but that is just in place. So I felt that I will speak a little more than just the GPS. So I will speak on three important things that we are doing. So the three important constellations of India are Navik, INSAT, GeoSat and IRS, and what these satellite constellations are doing for the common person, for the common man. So that is my talk. Now, why do we do space exploration at all? Three important things. First, of course, is that we want to understand how exactly the entire space or the universe has originated. Many of you must have heard from, if you attended Sanjay Dhurandar's lecture, from the Big Bang theory, which started this particular thing, that from a single point, the entire thing, there was a Big Bang and the universe started growing. So we want to understand that, the only way to understand is by sending certain satellites and instruments and making observations of that particular thing. So that is one of the things that also we want to understand how the planets have originated outside the solar system as well as inside the solar system. So that is one of the basic science questions that we normally ask, for which we do space technology and research. Second, as we have exploited almost all the resources over this planet, we want to exploit resources of other planets now. So we want to find out whether there is life in other planets, what is there in Venus, what is there in Mars, does the life exist, what is there on the moon, is there some minerals which we can use from those planets, etc. So we also want to go to those planets and exploit those resources and find out. So that's the second thing that, as you have seen, in fact, there is also exploitation of asteroids. There may be some precious metals, precious minerals which may be on the asteroids. So somebody has already landed something on the asteroid, you must have read in the newspapers. So that's the second major thing for which the space technology research is doing. But my talk is not on those very glamorous things, but my talk is on the third aspect, that look at the earth itself, where we are staying, and see what we can do in order to improve the quality of life of people on the earth. So that is the third for which the space technology or space research, the satellites we send up, etc. So there are three important constellation of satellites, not single satellite, a group of satellites which we send. And India has been doing it in all three areas. First is a navigation, satellite navigation. I will explain to you what do we mean by satellite navigation. We also do satellite communication. I will explain to you what satellite communications we are using for. And the third is remote sensing. We look at the earth using some instruments, the earth itself, that is remote sensing. So these are the three important things that we do. I will not use the term GPS because that's an American system, global position system. But the common term is called GNSS, Global Navigation Satellite System. Okay, that's the common term. And what we have termed is NAVIC for our own constellation. Okay, so what is navigation? Navigation is nothing but science of locating and determining one's position, where you are. You are here opposite to Mantralaya, in the YB Chauhan Pratishthan. What are its coordinates? That's the one which we want to find out. You want to go somewhere else, you want to know what are the coordinates there, so how do you reach? So all these aspects is navigation. That's the word navigation. So it has been important right from many, many years, ancient times. So from ancient times, how did people navigate from one place to the other place? By using landmarks. You just use the landmarks. You use celestial bodies, the North Star or many stars, or even look at the moon, sun, and that you used in order to do navigation. Then there were also many instruments which people, the sailors who were going from in the seas, they had many of those instruments. Compass is one of them. There are many other instruments which you will see in the literature which they use for navigation. In all these things, timing is also very important. Time at which you make an observation is also important. So that we will come to as we proceed. But as far as doing navigation from satellites, this concept started as soon as in 1957, once the Sputnik was launched by the Russians. Even at that time, how do we use satellites to find out where we are? It started. Very simple thing is using inverse Doppler effect. What does it mean? All of you know Doppler effect, right? That means whenever a body which is sending the signals moves away from you or moves in your direction, then you see change in its frequency, right? People give this example of when the train whistling and goes past, it frequency changes, you get a slightly different tone, right? Different things, etc. So similarly, if there is a satellite and you send a signal from the satellite to the person on the earth, if satellite is moving, if you are at center of the earth, then satellite is at the same distance, you will not have a Doppler effect. But if you are on the earth's surface somewhere, then that is relatively moving with respect to you. So there will be a change in the frequency of the receiver that you do. So using that, you can find out where you are. So this was the concept which has been used. Now, in order to do this anywhere, for example, all of you know, you require minimum 3 satellites. Because from 3 satellites, which are not in the same straight line, but they are geographically distant, if you send signals and I sitting on the earth or standing on the earth receive the signals from the 3 satellites, I can find out my x, y, z coordinates, right? Because it's basically, x1 minus x, x2 minus x, there are 3 unknowns, and if you know the position of the 3 satellites very well, then you can find out the position. But the problem is not that. How do you know at what time where is the satellite? That means you need to know the time. You need to know the time of the satellite when it is sending the signal. If the 3 satellites are sending the signals and the time that you think they are T1, T2, T3, if they are different, then it will not help you. So it's also important to have a measurement of time to very high accuracies from which are there in the satellites. That is the reason why we use atomic clocks. Atomic clocks are used in the satellites because they are stable, 1 in 10 raised to 14. That means 10 raised to minus 14 seconds, 1 second. That is the kind of accuracy that you have. So using these things, if you have a set of satellites, you can find out your position by observing their signals, and also that signals will contain where they are, so that you will know your position. Okay, so that is how this navigation is done. So satellite navigation, now we come to satellite navigation. So it has 3 important parts. One is a set of satellites which are there in the sky, and there may be many of those satellites in the sky, and somebody has done certain calculations to find out if any point on the Earth's surface you should be able to see at least 3 plus 1, 4 satellites. Then you require about 24 satellites. Right? The Earth is quite big, and any satellite, depending upon where it is, at what altitude it is, the number of satellites that you require becomes more. So that is the kind of thing which is called the space segment. That is the number of satellites which are there. Then there is a control segment on the ground where you are receiving these signals from the satellites. You have to find out what are the signals, what is the position of the satellite, and what time it has sent the signal, and at what time you have received the signal. So these are the things which you require. And you need to know the altitude, the XYZ coordinates of the satellite very accurately. And that also should be transmitted from the satellite to you, right? So all these things are required, and that is what is called the control segment. So all such stations will be there at various locations on the universe. So this is why it is important to have not only a large number of satellites, but also these control stations across the world. Then it becomes a truly global navigation satellite system. Then user segment. What does it mean? That means you require a small receiver which receives the signals from the satellite. And there will be a processor, computer, that means taking all the coordinates, etc. of different satellites, taking time values, do all the corrections, etc. and gives you the position, right? It looks so simple these days because every car, every mobile has a GPS. That means a small receiver which receives the signals from our global positioning system of the US, United States. Everybody uses that, right? So today. But that is what is called as a receiver. And all the processing, etc. is also embedded within that small receiver that you have. And in fact, today everywhere, I think GPS has almost pervaded the entire globe. So everybody thinks navigation means GPS, right? To that extent it is there. But in fact, this was started by the military long back in 1980s or so, even earlier than that, for their own, wherever they are having their ships, wherever they are having their aircraft, their armed movements, etc. They wanted to know very accurately the position of those things, and at the same time, so it should be make sure that it is not known to the others. But to what accurate can you find out your position? Is it 100 meters, 1 kilometer, or is it 1 centimeter? That depends upon a large number of factors. First of all, the instruments themselves, to what extent they are accurate. Then, what is the clock? Even if you have a small difference of 1 nanosecond in the clock time, because in 1 nanosecond the satellite would move so much, right? Because they are moving at the 10 kilometers per second in the space. So even if you make 1 second mistake, that means the position is off by 10 kilometers. So that kind of a thing is there from the sea satellites. So you get a receiver, the clock Because of that, you get error. Even if you have very high accurate clock, which are the atomic clocks, then sometimes the signal doesn't come directly. It may hit something and then come to you. Then there is an extra time that is there, right? So that is what also causes a certain times errors. Then in the atmosphere, when the signal comes, if the atmosphere has something called ionosphere and troposphere, where there are electrons, and these electrons change the speed of the light itself, okay? Because the refractive index changes, speed of light itself changes. So because of that, sometimes, and it is not always constant, so you have a delay because of that. Those are the things which also cause certain errors. Then there may be errors in the position of the satellite and satellite clock itself. So roughly, you get the position accurately only plus or minus 20 meters, general. But by having two frequencies in the satellites, you will be able to find out correct for all some of these corrections, because the way the signal passes through at two different frequencies will be different. So you will be able to subtract the effect of these troposphere, ionosphere by making observations at two different frequencies and make the measurements. So these are the basic concepts. So today in the world, there are many systems for navigation satellite systems, global navigation satellite systems. One with which we are all familiar is the GPS, Global Position System, which is of the United States. There are minimum 24 satellites, plus they also always have spare. And it's about 23,000 kilometers above the Earth. So they take about 11 hours, 58 minutes to take one orbit around that. You know, if it is 24 hours means it is geostationary. Many of you are aware. But if it is not 36,000 kilometers, much less than that, then it is much faster. So it is 11 hours. Then they use two frequencies. One is 1575 and the other is 1227 megahertz. And this is completely operational since large number of years. A few years earlier, they were not allowing everybody to get the signals from both frequencies. So with only one frequency, you were able to get only certain level of accuracy position, not very accurate. So the second signal was not available. But more recently, they have made that unrestricted and people are able to get that thing. But then in the meantime, they have made some more things in their own satellites. So for their own strategic military purposes, which is not available to you. And in fact, one of the reasons is that we did not have access to these things during our time of crisis in the late 1990s, etc. That is how that we should have our own navigation satellite system independent of GPS came in. And that is how Government of India said, you please build these things. That is the origin of our satellite system. Then there is a GLONASS, which is a Russian. They also have similar system. They are also at more or less at same altitude, but slightly different frequencies. Because if everybody uses the same frequencies, then there will be interference of signals, right? So they have a slightly different frequencies. Then there is a system of Galileo, which is the European unions. But today, of course, the European Union is, we don't know, one of them is less. But European together have made these satellites, that the Galileo system is called. And there is a COMPAS. This is a Chinese system. Chinese are also having a complete global navigation satellite system. Some of them already satellites are in orbit, some more they have to add in order to make it fully operational. But there are two regional satellite systems. What is ours is called IRNSS, that is the Indian Regional Navigation Satellite System. So, and there is also one Japanese which is there, which is also regional navigation satellite system. So we used to have it named as IRNSS, Indian Regional Navigation Satellite System. We said that we cannot have 24 satellites or so because it will take a long time to build 24 satellites. But in the short period itself, we wanted to have a navigation satellite system, and we said we will not want to be global, but only confining to our own regions, Indian regions, and 1500 kilometer from India, outside India also, a big square. And so we said that we will have 7 satellites, which these 7 satellites, if we build and we put them at appropriate places, any place in India and surrounding India 1500 kilometers, we will be able to get our position accurately. So we have put 3 satellites in geostationary orbit and 4 satellites in the geosynchronous orbits. And what does each satellite consist of? It consists of 2 types of payloads. One is called a navigation payload, which actually generates signals at these 2 frequencies, because we were not allowed to use the same frequencies as the US, European Union are using, because they will cause interference. So we had to go for the S band, which is 2492, 2.492 gigahertz. So that's what we are doing. But one thing that you notice here, that these 2 are very much apart compared to other satellites. So that means we are forced to have 2 frequencies which are apart. That means our antennas will become bigger and our receivers may not be as small as the GPS. You see, these are, if you are not early in the game, you cannot have everything. This is another very important. Very often people ask, why do you do, You have to be, you want to go to Antarctica, somebody will say, why are you spending money unnecessarily, what do you get? But after 50 years, if you find something very precious in Antarctica, you will have no claim on that if you have not gone and established your station there. So these are the things. If you go to the moon, in the beginning people will say that moon belongs to the entire, all the earth. But then afterwards some treaties will come. Like you are seeing the nuclear proliferation treaty and all. Only those who have exploded or they became nuclear powers before 1970 or something, they are part of that group. You are not allowed in that thing. So one of the things that you must remember is that we have to be early in the game. We have to be part of that thing. So each satellite consists of this, plus we have rubidium atomic clocks. See, the rubidium atom has a transition. Those of you who are, there is a transition. That transition is used to have a very stable frequency. And that is what we have. And these are launched by our own launch vehicles. First satellite was launched on July 2013, and within about 2.5 years or so, 3 years, we have all the satellites launched, and we have now complete constellation, and receivers have been built. So those people who use those receivers can get the signals from our own satellites and find out their positions. But when that will be actually used in your cars, etc., that I don't know. I can't say. Then we also have built a complete ground system to have the control of all these satellites and also to look at their signals and use them for making these corrections, etc. Now, there are large number of applications of these navigation satellites. These are already in use, but they are in use using GPS satellites. For example, you can find out where you are in the cars. You can find out where you go in disasters. You can use it because wherever the people are found, then they can transmit that particular signals and then find out. So there are a large number of things, vehicle tracking, fleet monitoring. So there are many applications which are there. But all these applications using our own receivers which are tailored to meet our own satellite signals is something which will happen in due course of time. Right now, it is not there. Right now what we have the space segment and we have the ground segments. The second aspect of my talk relates to communication, satellite communication. All of you are using this. What does a satellite do as far as communication is concerned? It relays from a station, you send a signal along with your information, right? For example, a video program is made or a serial is made or something like that, and that is sent to the satellite. What does the satellite do? Satellite takes that signal, demodulates it, does the amplification, changes its frequency, then it transmits back to the earth. And that is received by the antenna and you get that signal. This is what is done in a communication satellite. that is what is shown here. For example, this is the antenna which is there on the satellite. It receives the signal which is coming from the earth. Then it does the amplification, it does the frequency conversion down, and then again does the demodulation and sends it back. Now that is what is being done using our satellite communication. And this is something which is extremely useful, and we have now a very large number of communication satellites built by ourselves and being used. And these are used for various purposes. In fact, you are probably not, you are transparent the entire process. For example, some of the things for which it is used, one is the TV broadcasting itself is something. Then you have a direct to home, whether it is Tata Sky or many of those things, they are all done through satellite communication. Why do we do this particular thing is also very important. Earlier days, we had used only larger, smaller frequencies. When you use smaller frequencies, antennas become big, and that is why we had those earlier only the broadcasting. But once you make higher frequencies, satellite communication satellites, then your antennas become smaller. So each individual home can have a small antenna that is only about 1 meter, and you receive the signals, right? That is what is called direct to home. That is what is being done, KU band. But when you want to go to larger and larger frequencies, then of course the power that you require, the precision that you require in making those instruments is much more difficult. So initially we were doing only C band, but now we are doing KU band, which is used for direct to home. Then you can transfer data from one place to the other. That is what is called VSAT connectivity. Today, all Share Bazaar, or Share Bazaar uses, and the banks use, all of them use this particular satellite trunk networks in order to conduct their businesses. Then disaster warning systems, that is also done. And the most important thing is it is used for tele-education, telemedicine, which I will just explain to you. Tele-education is essentially nothing but a good teacher is at one place, he is teaching a group of students. But we want to have that particular lecture delivered to a large number of schools. So how do you do it? So from that, you actually take it to the satellite, transmit it, and from the satellite, you either broadcast it or you have the direct to home at different places. So the same lecture is heard by a large number of people. That is what is tele-education. Now there is a new element. Then it will be only one way. The teacher is speaking and the students are listening or not listening. But in case the students are listening, they want to ask questions, that means it has to be interactive. Then there should be a separate line from those classrooms, from the students to the lecturer. So that need not be done through satellites, that can be done through terrestrial links. So this is something which is done using our satellites today, and it is there all over the country. Particularly Haryana has been doing it extremely well. Karnataka uses for engineering colleges. Indira Gandhi National Open University uses it. So these are the things for which tele-education, the satellite communication is used. The second is telemedicine. How do you do the telemedicine? For example, I remember, you have hospitals, super specialty hospitals only in major cities. But in a small rural hospital, small dispensary, that expertise is not available. So what do they do? So what he does is he takes all the diagnostic tools and he transmits those things to the satellite, and from the satellite it comes to the super specialty hospital. The doctor, the senior doctor is sitting there, and that he listens to what that dispensary person is saying. He also asks him to give certain questions to the particular patient. All that is transmitted, and then he gives his specialist advice. And this is something which is extremely important wherever you have inaccessible regions. For example, all our army people who are in France, they don't have big hospitals there, but they need to be connected to Apollo or some other hospitals in Delhi, etc. So they have these telemedicine links provided to them. For example, during the 2004 tsunami, Andaman Nicobar Islands, there was no medical facilities available. So that was connected through satellites to the Chennai hospitals, Bangalore hospitals, etc. So they could take advantage of this through the telemedicine networks. So this is something which is there in right now using the satellite communication, many of these things. So for example, 384 hospitals provided with telemedicine facility, large number of, you can also have a mobile with an antenna so that it can immediately connect to the satellite and provide. So that is also something which has been made possible. Then there are something which is called emergency communication. You know, this is something very simple. This looks like a lantern. What is it called? Is a distress alert terminal. This is the one which the fishermen take when they go in their boats and trawlers, when they go for fishing. They have a small transmitter. They also have a navigation. So whenever they have a problem, that their ship, their boat has caught fire, or that man is not feeling well, or the boat is sinking. So there may be different aspects of this problem. So based upon that, what he does is he presses different buttons which are here. And so that message goes along with the coordinates. That is where I am telling you. Right now, this distress alert transmitter uses GPS. But hopefully it will use our IRNSS NAVIC signals. So what does it do? Then it goes to the satellite. From the satellite it goes to the Coast Guard. Coast Guard have these receiver terminals, etc. So that person at the Coast Guard gets the information that look, so and so person, fisherman at this particular place is having this problem. So they can send their, the boats or security related things to that to rescue that person. So this is something which is done using our communication satellites. This is the one. Then there are many what we call as satellite phones which are there, which are also connected to our satellite communication satellites. Then also many of the things for giving a warning, that is what is done using our own satellites. Then search and rescue, again in the ships, etc. There is one more thing with that fishermen which has been recently done. Although fishermen not necessarily use it properly, but whenever the fisherman crosses the international border, for example, fishermen from Gujarat have a tendency to go to Pakistan waters. So whenever that it crosses the imaginary line on the sea, that boat or something, that gives a red flag to him that you are now getting into the international waters, because that is all coordinates. So once the coordinates don't belong to you, they are not part of the Indian territory, it gives you a signal. Of course, the fishermen are not bothered about those things, because they think that the fish that you get in the Indus Delta of Pakistani waters fetch more money than the ones which you get. So they continue to go, and the same thing is true between Sri Lanka and India. So, but there is a facility available to warn him that look, you are now getting into international waters, from the international waters into the Pakistani waters, etc. Now, though that is related to satellite navigation and satellite communication, now I will speak to you about satellite remote sensing, the third constellation of satellites. And this I am a little more familiar because I worked for this for a longer period of time. What does remote sensing mean? Remote sensing is what I am doing right now. The light which is falling on your faces is reflected and it forms an image on the retina of my eye, and my brain recognizes and says he is so and so, she is so and so, and she is wearing green color, she is wearing red color, this kind, all that information. Now the same thing is translated into remote sensing. What do? We put the instruments on the satellites. They have these instruments which take the reflected radiation in different colors, red, blue, green, etc. and they form an image and they send it down to the earth. From that I find out what is there on the earth. That's remote sensing, right? But it's a little more than that, because as far as my eyes are concerned, I can only see blue, green, red, right? These are the three primary colors. That's the only thing that I see. I don't see infrared beyond red. I don't see beyond infrared. There is what is called as a shortwave infrared. Beyond that, there is what is called as a thermal infrared. Beyond that, there is a microwaves. I don't see all those things. My eyes do not have the sensitivity to see those things, etc. And also below blue, ultraviolet, I don't have. But these instruments, I can make them in such a way that they are also sensitive to all these wavelengths, the entire wavelengths. And the reason for that is that what I see in the blue, green, red, maybe they are identical. But in the infrared, they will be different. So I can distinguish them. So that's the idea of this remote sensing. So India has been almost in the forefront. In fact, it is considered as the best country as far as remote sensing satellites are concerned. So from 1988 onwards, it's almost 28 years, we have launched a large number of satellites in remote sensing. They look at the land, they look at the oceans, they look at the atmosphere. So what you get is meteorological forecasts are from the data which are coming from satellites which look at the atmosphere. But each of these sensors are different. If you want to look at the ocean, the same sensors cannot look at the land so well. They can look, but there are differences. And so atmosphere. So we have built these instruments over a period of time, and this is what we do. And what do we do with this data? What do we do with this data? Now, one of the important things that we do is agriculture. Now, from the data, satellite data, if you look at this particular picture, you will see here, this is Ahmedabad, this is actually Gandhinagar city. This is how it looks like. And then if you look at it much higher resolution, better optics, then you start seeing more. But today, we have much better resolution. That means a few meters on the ground I can see. Then what do I start seeing? I start seeing the actual fields, individual fields. Okay? Now you see here, now I am seeing the individual fields. Now if this is an agricultural crop, now what happens, as I mentioned to you, these agricultural crops, vegetation, in the infrared, our eyes can't see, but in the infrared, they reflect more light. In the red and in the blue, they absorb. Simple. Chlorophyll pigments, as you have seen in the school botany, they absorb blue light and red light, and they reflect green, and they reflect more in the infrared. But since my eyes can't see, what I have done is, I have assigned red color to infrared. So if they reflect more in the infrared, they should look red to me, right? Simple. I mean, you just understand whatever is seen in the red here is crop. Okay, but then you see here that there is a crop here. This is more red compared to this here. That means it's a different crop. There is another plot where there is no red. That means in that plot, nobody has sown anything, right? So by not just visually, but using computers and looking at all these differences in the light which they reflect, I can make out what crop it is. Is it wheat? It is gram? It is something else? Or is it a good wheat or a bad wheat? That means something which will give you more yield or less yield. All such things you can do looking at these pictures by computer processing. So we do that, but we soon realized that during the period from June to October, there is all clouds. So my satellites don't see. Satellites are 800 kilometers. Clouds are there at 10 kilometers. They only see the clouds. So most of my agriculture is done during this period, right? So we said that, look, we will use radars, microwave radars. So microwave radars are built and put in the satellites. And when this microwave radar sees, even if there are clouds, I will start seeing everything on the ground below, through the clouds. So that is the one which we use. So during October to, let's say, April, I use optical data, but during June to October, I use microwave data. So using this, I do many applications. One, I'm identifying crops. And one of the important things which has been done is to look at how do we increase agricultural production in this country. There are only three ways in which you can increase. One, you can increase productivity per unit area. If you increase that, it will become. Second, in the same area, if you grow 3 times, 4 times, normally what you do is you grow something during the Kharif season, that is June to October, and then you use something during that particular portion, right? In the September to October, October to April. But you can also grow 3 times, then you will increase the total production. Third thing that you can do is also to look at how I can introduce, how I can use this particular information for increasing the productivity. So for example, one of the things that we did was that during the June to October, we found that all that is red, that is seen here, there is crop here. But during October to April, we find that only in the Indo-Gangetic plains and some of the delta regions, crops are grown. But at the same time, we find that there is some cyan color all through here. What does it mean? That shows me that there is residual moisture in these regions, but it is not being used to grow crops. Why? Because the farmers in those regions they are marginal farmers, they do not have access to seeds or credit or any of those things. And this is something of the order of 11.65 million hectares, this much area. And even if you get per hectare 2 tons, that means 23 million tons you increase. So this is the kind of information you provide on a national scale. Then you can do it at the state level, district level. And so government has used this information in order to find out where are such fallow lands. These are called fallow lands, identify fallow lands. And at the same time, there is a possibility because there is a residual moisture because of the rainfall during the monsoon season. So this is one such application that is being done. The second very important application that is done is that what you see here is this northern India. All this Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh or Uttarakhand, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat and all these things. Now what we have done is to identify here 15 kilometer by 15 kilometer segments. They have been, by using statistics, they have been chosen. And satellites every 5 days go over these places and look at them. And using the data of every 5 days over the entire period, you find out how much wheat is there in that, how much gram is there, how much some other crop is grown in that thing. And you also get certain parameters which are related to their productivity. Whenever the crop is very good, it has more reflectance in the infrared and more absorption in the red, right? So using those things, we make a prediction of total area as well as total production, and which we are able to do. For example, in case of wheat, it gets harvested in April, but we are able to do end of February, early March itself. So based upon that, government can say, well, what should be the support price, how much should I export, how much should I import, what should be the demand, etc. How many railway wagons do I need to carry them from one particular place in Punjab, let us say, to some other place. So all such decisions are made on the basis how much it is there. So these things are done using this satellite data. And this is done not only for wheat, but for rice and many other crops, etc. There is one more very important thing. During the winter, when the wheat flowers and the grains are filling and they are getting matured, if the temperatures are not low enough, then the weight of each grain becomes less if it is higher. So we use that temperature measurements, which are also done from satellites, in that model for making predictions of the productivity. So all such things are done using satellite data today. There is a center which is called Mahalanobis National Crop Forecast Center in Delhi, which has been set up by us after our work, etc., which provides this information. Now, it is not just that. It can also do for competitive crops for neighboring countries. For example, you have basmati rice, which is grown in Pakistan as well as in India. How much is grown in Pakistan? Is it more? Is it good this year? Then my price is how much do I sell? Or for example, tea, Sri Lanka and India. Jute between Bangladesh and India. So it is not just for our sake, but it's also for economic importance. This we can do. And this we can do for other countries as well. So this is another application which is being done today. Then many a times crop is grown, everything has been done, but when it is harvesting stages, there is a spoils, hailstorms or floods, many of these things, or there is a disease. Just to show you one example here, this is West Bengal, and here you see very red tone here on January 10. That means crop was good. But January 29 you see it has become quite blackish here. That means there was a disease which has affected those things. So when you know that, that means if the yield is going to be less of those things. So sometimes if you don't detect them advance, you can't do anything, only you get the information. But if you get in advance, then depending upon that, you can apply pesticides, etc. And this is of course related to floods. Now what they have done is to look at these things through a mobile and give that information so that it goes to the central headquarters. Based upon that, they use crop insurance. Now today in the country, as you see, what is that called? Gramik, crop insurance scheme is the most important thing. For that, this data is being used, etc. Now let me come to water. Particularly, first let me explain to you groundwater. So people want to dig a well or bore well. How do you go about doing that? You can have those people with the wise type of sticks, and people go and something they do, but that's, I do not know what is the scientific basis of those things. But from satellites, what do you do? See, groundwater in the ground doesn't occur just by chance. It's not by chance. It is because there are certain factors which help the groundwater to be confined there in that particular place. What are those things? And are they having any signatures on the surface, which I can see from satellite? That's the basic science in that one. Many times you go on the ground physically yourself, you may not see. But the satellite gives you a synoptic view of the total area. It provides you interrelationships between them. That provides you converging evidence for the occurrence of groundwater. Just to show you some examples here. Here in this area, you can see here there is a line like this. There is a line which cuts this. There is a line here which cuts this. These are called lineaments. These are geological structures which are there on the ground. When they cut, that means intersection, etc., these are the regions where they allow more percolation of rainwater. When they allow more percolation of groundwater, then it is possible that the water which has gone there will form an aquifer. Sometimes they find unconfined aquifer. That means that water will flow away, otherwise it is confined aquifers. So you get such signatures on the ground from the satellite images. On the other hand, you can see here a river which is a dry, there is no water which is flowing like this. But actually you find that here a lot of red tone is there. That means a lot of crop or vegetation is growing. That means the water availability in this region is much higher. So that's the second surface expression. Here also you see here, water is there in this channel. But in this channel, there is no water, but there is a red tone. That means this might have been the way in which the stream was flowing earlier. So this is another place where you can find groundwater. Now here you can see one very good example. These are streams, drainage lines. Okay, these are drainage lines. You can see here. And then there is something which cuts these drainage lines here. This is called a dike in geology. Dike means it's a wall. But this wall we don't see from the ground. It is below the ground, which has a certain expression on the satellite image. Now what does this wall or the dike do? That stops the water from flowing from one place to the other. So the place at which it stops, you find red tones. That means there is a water availability. So if you wanted to have a drilling bore well, this is the best place to do those things. You can see here. Then there are some features, arcuate features, folds, etc., the way earth itself folds, etc. So this is just to show you some examples which are surface expressions, geological, which provide you converging evidences to the occurrence of groundwater at those places. So if you dig in those areas, your probability of getting the groundwater becomes higher compared to the other places. Not based upon somebody else's or somebody told me you go there. No, not like that, but based upon these things. So using this information, this water has been done. And what has been done using these maps are available for many states, around 20 states in the country today. Now, it uses a very simple expression, that is VIBGYOR, violet, indigo, blue, etc. Red means it's a danger area, no possibility of groundwater. Violet means there is a possibility of groundwater, more in that gradations. So, for example, here, no way you will not get the water. But here, along this, you will get the groundwater. Now, on the same map, we have also identified villages. Where is the village? So, from the village, if this is near, that means there is no possibility. You have to transport water. But if the village is somewhere here, then you can have the groundwater, etc. So, on the basis of these things. But the most important thing in these things, at what depth and how much water it can give, you have provided this. During the recent drought situation, particularly in Karnataka, in Bijapur districts, etc., these maps were used and they were used to dig bore wells for many of the places where the groundwater was obtained. But even if the maps show that this is potential for groundwater, you may not get groundwater if you have exploited everything, right? So it's actually important to recharge. That means you should allow the rainwater to go, because it takes more number of years to recharge than to exploit. Exploit you can do in very short period of time. Now, so on the same maps, it may not be very visible to you here, but you also shown where are the places where you should have a percolation tank, where you should have a check dam, where you should have some other ponds, etc. So you use them to do the recharging of the groundwater, then you get this. So this is another application which is being done using remote sensing data. Now the ones which I showed you earlier, that is the one here, you see here. The third is a watershed. You know, watershed is a very important project in India, particularly in dryland areas, etc. So what you do is, in the watersheds, a very important concept is, the watersheds which are in the higher reaches of the river, you should treat them first, and then you come down, etc., etc. So that it helps you to do that thing. Wherever there is more erosion, you should treat them first. How do you find erosion more? From the satellite images. If the number of drainage lines is more, that means erosion is more. You can see here, this region, there are more drainage lines, more erosion. Whereas here, there are only few streams, less erosion. So you treat this first. So if you do all those things, put a lot of money, you form these what you call as villages, watershed associations, you provide them water, and then they ask you ask them to make farm ponds, you ask them to make check dams, etc. That's what is being done in the country. But then, after 5 years, has the money been really spent on the purpose for which it is done? You can use satellite data to monitor, also to find out the efficacy of what you have done. For example, here if you see here, this is the one which a bunding activity has been done in a watershed, and you see here, in general, vegetation is much better in this area, whereas in this area, this watershed development had not been taken place, and you see it has remained like that. Within the same area, you can see distinctly two different things. This is the one where you had done the watershed development, this is the one where you had not done, and this definitely shows you improvement in vegetation, productivity, conservation of moisture, etc. Here you see here, in Kolar district of Karnataka, this is one farm pond which has been done, and it looks black inside. That means water is still remaining there, which is supposed to collect water. This also is collecting water. But on the other hand, if you see this particular thing, water doesn't exist. That means the place where you did this one is not appropriate. It has to be impervious layer, then the water will remain. Otherwise it doesn't remain. So all such things are also done using satellite data these days in the country. The other important application that we do with satellites are related to glaciers. This is just to show you a glacier. This is snow. See the difference between snow and glacier. Snow, the one snow happens, snow is fluffy, it has certain interstitial air spaces, it reflects a lot of light, right? And it is not completely water in that sense. So that is what you see here. When snow gets started undergoing transformation, that means it gets pressed, etc., and then it becomes ice. That ice, along with some other debris, etc., becomes a glacier. And just like a river moves, water moves, glacier also starts moving. And that is what is the movement of the glacier. And that glacier, when it moves, that entire ice, where a point where it has, let's say, sees the temperatures, higher temperatures, that means when it comes down, at higher reaches, it's a cold temperature, so it remains ice. But when it comes down, then it reaches the temperature at which it starts melting. Then you see here, it melts, then it becomes water here. So this is the glacier, this is the snow area, this is the snow line, and these are the tributary of the glaciers, etc. So from a satellite image, you can identify snow cover, you can identify glacier, you can identify glacier at what point it is becoming water. Gangotri, for example. Ganga originates from Gangotri means that water here, then it becomes a stream, etc. Now, if this particular point goes up higher latitudes, that means at higher latitudes itself the temperature is increasing. That is what is meant by retreat of the glaciers. Okay, so this is one of the important applications that we do using satellite data. Now, many of you have heard that glaciers are retreating. In fact, Gangotri has retreated by a few hundred meters in the last 40, 50 years. What is the effect of these things? That means in the short term, more melt takes place. That means more water comes into the Ganga, Yamuna and the Brahmaputra rivers. It leads to floods, etc. But after a certain period of time, when no more glacier exists, then you don't get. The so-called perenniality of our rivers in the northern India will not be there, right? So this is why it's important to study these things. So we have studied this entire Himalayan glaciers, and we find that about 75% of the glaciers are retreating, about 10% of them are remaining same, but some of them are advancing, like Siachen, etc., Karakoram ranges. So this is what we have found. The other important application relates to fish. Let me tell you why do you get fish at a particular place, just like water. Fish, where are they? You know, when the fisherman goes, he goes. Of course, he is a very intelligent man, he knows where the fish are. But if I want to know where the fish are from satellites and help him better, that's the question. So, where do the fish accumulate? Three important things. One of the things is fish look for food. Okay? So, where is the food? What is the food for them? We call them as phytoplanktons, unicellular plant cells. Unicellular plant cells, phytoplanktons. Then, they also like a certain temperature range. They don't want very high temperatures, they don't want very cold temperature. Certain temperature. Third is the currents, so that their breeding, etc., it is most ideal. So, these are the things which we can measure from satellites. Phytoplanktons, how do we measure? Phytoplanktons, I told you, are plant cells. Plant cells are having chlorophyll pigments. Chlorophyll pigments absorb red light, reflect infrared. They also absorb blue, right? So if I have a sensor which measures this light which is coming from the ocean surface, just like in crops, here also, I will be able to find out where are the phytoplanktons, right? That is what. If the fish are herbivorous, that means vegetarian, they will directly feed on these phytoplankton cells. If they are carnivorous, then what happens? The smaller fish which feed on these phytoplanktons, they become food for the bigger fish. You know, there's a food chain. So this chlorophyll, indirectly, we are getting from the satellite data by measuring light which is reflected from these things. And what you see here, these red things, that there is more chlorophyll, that means they are phytoplanktons. There are more chlorophyll pigments, that means the more phytoplanktons. Then there are certain features within that. Then we also have certain temperatures measured on these things, put them together, currents, and we identify areas where the fish accumulate. And we put it in the vernacular language. We say in which direction you go and at what depth, and then the fishermen get this one. So every 3 days, these features are normally there for 3 to 4 days. They don't go away just like that. So our satellites measure, make the chart and give it to the fishermen in the vernacular language, and that is something which the fishermen use. Now, fishermen complain to us that why are you not giving between June to October? In June to October there is a lot of cloud cover, so we don't get this data. But it is also true that during that time there is a greater breeding, and if during that time you somehow give them data, they will catch all the juvenile fish, and it will be not a sustainable fishery. So from indirectly it also helps. Some of you might have heard they have a voluntary moratorium for the Kerala fishermen not to fish during certain months, etc. So satellite data also helps in that direction to do those things. Then there is something called tuna. Tuna fish has a slightly more characteristics. It likes to have more transparent water. In addition to having this chlorophyll of phytoplanktons, more transparent water. So we are able to measure it because if the light can penetrate for longer depth, that means it is more transparent. So that is something which comes from the satellite data. That's called the optical depth or extinction coefficient. So we do that and then give the advisory. That is how tuna is also being exploited these days using satellite data. Then there is a lot of applications related to forestry, mangroves. Bombay, of course, you are all familiar with the coastal regulation zone. There are many issues. Goa also has many issues. That means you are not supposed to build many of the things within 500 meters of the highest of the high tide lines, right? And those maps have been prepared using satellite data. They are being used. And in fact, this algae and all those things are also mapped using the satellite data. Disaster is another important application where satellite data is extensively used. We have satellites which are specifically asked to look at the cyclones, look at the floods, look at the earthquakes, look at the landslides, and provide data to the damaged areas, etc. For example, this is something which is for Srinagar, J&K. Entire thing was mapped, and post-flood, pre-flood, you can see here all this is settlement areas, and all of them are underwater. So this is something which we do very regularly. Cyclone, you identify this eye of the cyclone that you are able to identify from the satellite data, and every half an hour if you identify, then you will be able to find its track. You will also be able to find where it is likely to hit the land and how much intensity. All these things are done using the satellite data. And forest fire in the Tirupati-Tirumala hills is also done. One of the very recent applications is archaeology. In Talakadu regions, it is being used in order to identify areas which are of historical importance, etc. This is something, 1 minute I will spend on this one. This particular thing which I told you about telemedicine, here is a patient. This is Ahmedabad Sabarmati Jail. This is Ahmedabad Sabarmati Jail, in which we established a telemedicine center. This is a convict who is supposed to be hanged after 15 days. He is having a heart problem. A local doctor examines him, and through telemedicine he goes to the Apollo hospital and provides whatever special needs to be done as far as that patient is concerned. Here there were a large number of youth who were unemployed, who were creating problems in Bhuj. They were given electrical wiring training through satellite medium, and then they were given certificates so they could do employment on their own, etc. Now all this information is available in a portal called Bhuvan, nrsc.bhuvan.gov.in. Many of you who are interested, you can look at it. Lot of this data and information is available in these things. This is just to show you some of the things in Jhabua built check dams held by the Watershed Development Program. It's all using satellite data. A fisherman from Lakshadweep says time in catching tuna fish using advisories delivered in local language. A farmer from Jaunpur reclaims and treats unusable sodic land through sodic land reclamation project, and by drilling borewell in sites using RS data, etc. So These are the things which are possible from satellites. So together, navigation, satellite communication, and satellite remote sensing, not only they are technologically very advanced, but the kind of applications you do to actually improve the quality of life in the country. So there are many applications which are being done. Thank you very much for your patience.
Can deal with 5 questions.
Yeah.
Sir, I have one question. Many years back, in the year somewhere in 1975, the Modi dam was burst, and American satellite has located that, and when the satellite was stationed there, they were able to see the dam and the water flowing inside the dam, and they communicated to the satellite could communicate to the local and American people. Now, how all those things were done in those particular days, and what is the latest in this particular event?
Yeah.
Thank you.
It is also, using satellites only you can do those things. Today also, we are doing those things. There are many small, what we call as glacial lakes in the Himalayas. Now these glacial lakes during the time winter, they are all frozen. But what happens sometimes when the snow starts melting, it builds more pressure on that particular lake, and suddenly it bursts and it comes. And the flood happens, flash flood. So these are being closely monitored today from our own satellites. There are a large number of such glacial lakes which are there in the Himalayas. Some years back in 2003, etc., such a thing happened from the Himalayas, etc. In Arunachal Pradesh also it happens many a times. Because of the landslides, it gets blocked, frozen. Later on during the summer, it starts melting. For example, Kedarnath, in addition to heavy rainfall, one of the Chora-Chori or Sachora Bagh, so glacial lake burst. So there was a convergence of disasters which resulted in the Kedarnath problem. And these are monitored from satellites. But when exactly it will burst is not something which the satellite can tell. Right.
I have 2 questions. One is about how common.
One at a time.
Okay, so whichever is the.
Yeah, sure, please.
So one is how a common person can use such system like a farmer or a fisherman. So that utilizing those system is very important for me.
Yeah.
If I have to use it, how can I use it?
Now, there are in each of the states, in addition to the ISRO, each of the states has a small center. For example, Maharashtra has a center in Nagpur, which interacts with the local people to provide this information. So, people can use that. But many of these things are not so localized for your plot, etc., but they are for a larger regions. That is where these watershed associations and such things become important. But it is available. And the website which I gave you, you can go to that thing. They are now freely available.
Hello, sir. Hello, sir. So you said that Haryana and Karnataka using EduSat extensively for their schooling purpose, educational purpose. So what is the scenario of Maharashtra? Is Maharashtra using?
Maharashtra is also using. In fact, that institute in Pune, I don't remember now, that is also using. Rajasthan is using. Northeastern India is using a large number of these things for schools. Large number of states are using this tele-education, the communication. But some other people use these days terrestrial links also, because terrestrial links also have become quite well established now, so they use. But this is most useful for all inaccessible regions. Yes, please.
Can you throw some light on the sort of discovery of the force of space?
Yeah. In fact, we at the Space Application Center had done a lot of work on this. It is believed that there was a mighty river flowing west this one meeting somewhere the Arabian Sea. Now, one doesn't know, but the kind of things that you have seen from satellite images are what we call as paleo channels. That means channels where below the ground there is a certain moisture which is available, and that is seen from our radar images, etc. So these paleo channels have been identified. Now Rajasthan government, what it did was it also did certain digging at some of those places and found the moisture. But the point is whether, the Bhabha Atomic Research Center here also did some isotope hydrology to find out whether that water actually is from that region of Himalayas flowing, etc. But all these things have been done, but whether it is exploitable for purposes of water is something which is not established. That means even if you have that existence of a particular thing, but is there any enough water in that thing, that is not established. Second thing is, what is the reason for its extinction? That is another thing. So I do not know at what period of time, but at a certain period of time when there was an upliftment, so the water, the river which was flowing like this, because of that it started flowing like this towards the east. That is how this became, that means the water flowing into the west side stopped. So this is one of the reasons. There is an extremely good book, treatise written by Professor Mail of Maharaja Sayaji Rao Karekar University, MS University of Baroda, on this just Saraswati, and also the satellite data analysis. That book, it is there. So those of you who are interested can look at it. Dwarka, you know, one important thing I must tell you as far as remote sensing is concerned, it gives you only surface, because the light doesn't go through the water so much below, only a certain portions, etc. So there have been people asking whether, Dwarka existed below the sea, that kind of problems. People have tried, but there is no conclusive evidences for that. Yes, please.
Last question. Last question.
What?
Why you did not come?
Once he has already asked. Oh, see, in the Jaisalmer area, we find diatomic earth. And diatomic earth is found only at the delta of a good water, I mean fresh water and sea water. So that means that it was a port once upon a time. So is that somebody has done any research on that?
No, I don't think. But as I see the channels, the river channels have been delineated. And people, what you are saying is that this entire Saurashtra and this area was under the sea earlier is proved wrong. In fact, Dholavira, etc. are also there. No, there also it is, that was a port earlier, right? So those things are there, but not more than that. As far as satellite data is concerned, I mean, there may be other evidences.
No, you see the Jaisalmer area nearby, there is one place called Upper
Hmm.
the sea. And it has got a fresh water. So where did it come?
Freshwater occurrence need not be only from the Himalayas. It can.
Is it possible in the future every person will have their own satellite?
What for? Personal satellite. You see.
To do all these things. Suppose I am a farmer or a common citizen.
No, today all through the world, I can tell you that satellite data, there are so many satellites, United States, Japan, China, Russia, Indian satellites, and all this data is available freely available to you. Okay? So you don't have to have your own satellite. You can look at the data first and see what use you can do. Later on, if it is not useful, because making a satellite, sending it, receiving the data, processing it is not something like everybody can do it, because it costs money.
Thank you, sir.
What is the possibility of manipulation of the data which is generated through the system, like remote sensing?
Manipulation means somebody
or
manipulate.
you use it or manipulate it, like changing the data.
You see,
Like if there is a forest, I can see that satellite cannot lie with me, but there is some manipulation taken place by changing the data, like that.
yeah, this is something which the countries want to do in order to camouflage their installations. Countries do. But so if I have received a satellite and let us say governor's bungalow is here, I don't want to be known to the others, then I put a small cloud over it. Okay? Or what I do is in our language, using computers, these are called pixels, each point. Now 6 points I make into 1 point. That means I decrease the resolution in a photograph. Or I put a grass there. This is called manipulating. But people who are in this business, they know it. You get my point? You can fool some people, but not the people whom you want to fool. Okay? Yeah.
Friends, for past 1 hour we had a feast in a different unknown area, and we are much knowledgeable today while going out of this hall. And I think there was fairly a good interaction also. That means people have listened to him carefully and some questions came to their minds. They were answered accordingly. Thank you to all the college students who have shown their presence over here. I had sent the messages to Dr. Kolte of KC College and Jain College and other colleges. Please do come over here because these are such knowledgeable speeches that are being organized here. And if you are really more interested in this particular subject, and if the college students they demand, we can have a 3 to 4 hours workshop also with Dr. Nawal Gun, but demand has to come from you. If minimum 25 to 50 students they come in from different colleges, they contact Yashwantrao Chauhan Pratishthan, we can organize that also. Next month we will have the 5th lecture of this series on 30th of July. And Professor A.B. Pandit from Institute of Chemical Technology, he will deliver a lecture on the solid waste, from that methane manufacturing and from that generation of electricity. So that is the subject, 5 o'clock in the evening as usual. I must thank Dr. Nawal Gun for having taken pains to reach to Mumbai in such a rainy season, and as he was telling, that it did not take more time for him to come from Bangalore to Mumbai, but it took more time for him to come from Khar, where ISRO's guest house is there, to reach to IB Chauhan Center. But this is the rain, and then we were praying for the rain for past so many months, so we don't have a complaint against rain. Doesn't matter, we'll travel more time. Thank you all.